Today we're going to be unraveling a really fascinating family tree from the Bible. Esau's descendants and the chiefs of Edom.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You probably remember Esau, right? As Jacob's twin brother, the one who famously traded his birthright for a bowl of stew.
Right.
But his story goes far beyond that single impulsive act.
Yeah.
Genesis 36 lays out his lineage in detail.
Right.
And it's more than just a list of begats. You know, it gives us a glimpse into the origins of the Edomites and their complex relationship with the Israelites.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much we can kind of unpack from what seems like a simple genealogy.
So Esau himself ends up with 3 wives.
Mm-hmm.
Quite the family dynamic.
Yeah, indeed. And, his choice of wives is really interesting. You've got Ada, a Hittite, and Oholibama, Hivite, representing the local Canaanite population.
Right.
But then there's Basemath, the daughter of Ishmael.
Mm.
And Ishmael, of course, was Abraham's son.
Right.
So this connection links Esau's lineage back to Abraham, highlighting the intricate web of relationships, in that region.
So it's like those family reunions, where you discover you have some distant cousin that you never knew existed.
Exactly.
Except on a much grander scale.
Very much grander scale, exactly.
And through these 3 wives, Esau has a whole bunch of sons.
Yes, he does.
Aleph, Ezrol, Jushalam, just to name a few.
Yeah.
What stands out to you about this mix of wives and sons? I mean, does it tell us anything about Esau's place in society at that time?
Well, I think it suggests a level of integration, with the different groups inhabiting Canaan.
Okay.
By marrying women from various backgrounds, Esau was essentially forging alliances, expanding his family's influence.
Right.
And it reflects the diverse cultural landscape of the region.
Okay, so we have this growing blended family.
Right.
What happens next?
Well, Esau becomes very prosperous,
Okay.
acquiring vast flocks and herds and possessions. The text even emphasizes that both he and Jacob had too much livestock to stay in the same area.
Wow, imagine having so much wealth that you have to relocate.
It speaks volumes about their economic power and influence.
Yeah.
So Esau decides to move his family and all his possessions to the mountainous region of Seir.
And this is where the story of the Edomites truly begins.
Precisely, this migration to Seir marks the establishment of the Edomite territory,
So,
shaping their identity as a distinct people.
right.
And as we delve further into the genealogy, we start to see the emergence of chiefs among Esau's descendants.
Okay, now the term chief sounds pretty straightforward, but I'm curious about the specifics. Like, what kind of authority did a chief hold in this context? Were they like mini kings within their clans?
Yeah, it's likely that they held positions of leadership and influence, within their respective families or clans,
Okay.
playing a role in decision-making, resolving disputes, representing their people in interactions with other groups.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily a formal title like king,
Right.
but they certainly wielded a degree of power.
So these chiefs were instrumental in shaping Edomite society from the ground up.
Yeah.
And speaking of influential figures, one name that really jumps out from this list is Eliphaz, Esau's firstborn son.
Yes. Eliphaz is a key figure not only for being the eldest, but also for his descendants, particularly a son named Amalek.
Now that name rings a bell. Didn't the Amalekites become major adversaries of the Israelites later on?
You're absolutely right. The Amalekites play a significant role in biblical history, often clashing with the Israelites.
Right.
And here in Genesis 36, we see their ancestral roots, traced back to Eliphaz through his son Amalek.
It's amazing how this genealogy connects these seemingly disparate events and groups across generations. It's like we're uncovering these hidden threads that tie the whole biblical tapestry together.
I agree. It's a testament to the interconnectedness of these ancient societies.
Yeah.
And the importance of understanding their family histories to grasp, the broader historical narrative.
Right.
But there's another detail about Eliphaz's line that's worth noting. Amalek's mother, Timnah, was a concubine.
So not a wife in the traditional sense, but what exactly did being a concubine entail back then?
It's a complex social status. A concubine was often a woman who belonged to a man but had a lower social standing than a wife.
Right.
Her children, however, could still be considered legitimate heirs.
That adds another layer to the family dynamics and social structures we see unfolding in this genealogy.
But exactly, it's a glimpse into the complexities of, ancient family life and societal norms.
I love those little details that just give us a peek into the past.
Well, speaking of details, remember the Horites we mentioned earlier? The people already inhabiting Seir before Esau arrived.
Right, the original inhabitants of the land.
Genesis 36 doesn't just focus on Esau's descendants.
Okay.
It also delves into the Horite lineages, listing names like Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon.
So we're not just seeing the rise of the Edomites, we're also getting a glimpse into the people they encountered and likely interacted with, in their new homeland.
And this intermingling of lineages is crucial. It shows that the Edomites didn't simply displace the Horites.
Okay.
They likely coexisted, intermarried, and formed a more complex social fabric than a simple us versus them narrative.
It reminds us that history is rarely black and white.
Precisely. And among these Horite lineages, we find this fascinating little anecdote about a man named Anna.
Okay.
While tending his father's donkeys, he stumbled upon hot springs in the desert.
Now that's a discovery I bet he wasn't expecting.
Right.
It must have been quite a sight to see those steaming springs in the middle of the desert.
It's a moment of human experience that shines through the genealogical lists.
Yeah.
You can almost imagine Anna's surprise and the impact, this discovery might have had on his community.
It humanizes these ancient figures, reminding us they were more than just names on a page.
Yes.
They had lives and experiences and even moments of serendipity.
Absolutely. And speaking of unexpected turns,
Okay.
the next section of Genesis 6 shifts from individual lineages to a list of kings who ruled in Edom. And here's the kicker. These kings reigned before any Israelite king ever sat on a throne.
Wow, that completely reframes the timeline. We tend to think of the Israelite monarchy as the dominant force in the region.
Right.
But this tells us the Edomites had their own established kingdom well before that.
It challenges our preconceived notions and reveals a more intricate political landscape than we might have imagined.
So let's talk about these Edomite kings. What do we know about them and their reigns?
Well, we get their names, their lineage, and in some cases, little details about their accomplishments.
Okay.
For instance, there's King Hadad, who's described as having smitten Midian in the field of Moab.
So we see glimpses of military prowess and territorial expansion, even in these early Edomite kings.
Right.
It suggests they were not just rulers, but also warriors who actively shaped the political landscape of the region.
And after this fascinating detour into the realm of Edomite kingship, the chapter circles back to Esau's family, providing a final list of chiefs from his various lines. It's like the author is emphasizing the enduring importance of these ancestral figures in shaping Edomite identity and leadership.
It's as if they're saying, remember these names, for they are the foundation upon which the Edomite nation was built.
Exactly. They represent the continuity of leadership and the legacy passed down through generations.
But now I'm curious about the bigger picture. What does all this genealogical detail tell us about the Edomites as a people and their place in biblical history?
That's a great question. It's easy to get lost in the who begat whom. Right. But this genealogy is more than just a family tree. It lays the foundation for understanding the Edomites, their relationship with the Israelites, and the importance of lineage in ancient societies.
Okay, so let's talk about that relationship with the Israelites. Remember, Esau and Jacob were twins.
Yes.
And their story is filled with rivalry even from the womb.
Absolutely. That sibling rivalry with Jacob tricking Esau out of his birthright and the tension between their mothers, Rebekah favoring Jacob and Isaac favoring Esau, sets the stage for a very complex dynamic that echoes through generations.
So the Edomites and the Israelites descended from these twin brothers are almost like feuding cousins on a grand scale.
That's a good way to put it. They share a common ancestor,
right,
but have distinct identities, and their relationship is marked by, competition over land resources and political power.
And we see examples of this throughout biblical history, right? Like this story in Numbers 20, where the Israelites ask permission to pass through Edom on their journey to the Promised Land.
Exactly. The Edomites refuse even threatening war, which shows how that early tension between Jacob and Esau continues to cast a long shadow over their descendants.
It's almost as if they're holding onto a grudge that's been passed down for centuries.
And it's not just a biblical story. Archaeological evidence and historical records confirm a long and often contentious relationship between the Edomites and the Israelites.
So it's real history, not just a narrative confined to the pages of the Bible.
Precisely. It was a complex dynamic with periods of both conflict and cooperation, reflecting the realities of political power and territorial disputes in the ancient Near East.
So by understanding Esau's family and the Edomites' origins, we gain a deeper understanding of biblical history and the complex interplay between different groups in that period.
It adds depth and nuance to our reading of the biblical text and sheds light on the historical realities, behind the stories.
It's fascinating how these seemingly obscure genealogical lists can unlock so much insight into the past.
They're not just names on a page, they're keys to unlocking a richer understanding of history, culture, and human relationships.
We've talked about the chiefs and the kings, but what about the everyday lives of the Edomites? What do we know about their society, their culture, their beliefs?
That's a great question. And while the Bible doesn't provide, an exhaustive account of Edomite daily life,
Right.
we can piece together a picture from various sources. One thing that stands out is their skill in metalworking, particularly copper mining and smelting.
So they were like the industrialists of their time.
In a sense, yes. They inhabited a mountainous region,
Right.
rich in mineral resources, and became quite adept at extracting and utilizing them. They controlled important trade routes and likely profited significantly from their metalworking expertise.
That makes sense, considering their strategic location in the mountainous region of Seir. Control over those trade routes would have given them both economic and political power. What about their religious beliefs? Did they worship the same God as the Israelites?
It's believed that the Edomites had their own pantheon of gods with a central deity named Quas.
Quaz, that's an interesting name. Does it tell us anything about their beliefs?
He was often depicted as a warrior god,
Okay.
which aligns with the Edomites' reputation as a strong and sometimes aggressive people.
So a warrior god for a warrior people, does that suggest they were a militaristic society?
There's evidence to suggest that warfare played a significant role in Edomite culture. Their mountainous terrain likely fostered a sense of independence and a need for strong defenses.
Makes sense. Living in those rugged mountains, you'd have to be tough and resourceful.
Exactly. They also had a reputation for horsemanship and military prowess, which would have been essential for both defense and expansion.
So we've got skilled metalworkers, strategic traders, and fierce warriors. It sounds like the Edomites were a force to be reckoned with.
They certainly left their mark on history, and their story, intertwined with that of the Israelites, offers a fascinating glimpse into the complexities of ancient societies and the enduring impact of family ties, rivalries, and cultural differences.
So let's try to put some of those pieces together. What can we say about Edomite society, their culture, their values?
Well, we know they lived in a mountainous region,
Right.
which likely shaped their worldview and way of life. Mountains often symbolize strength, resilience, and a degree of isolation.
That makes sense. You'd have to be tough and resourceful to thrive in that kind of environment.
Exactly. And this rugged landscape likely influenced their social structures as well. We can imagine them living in scattered settlements, perhaps centered around oases or strategic locations for defense.
So not a sprawling empire, but a network of interconnected communities, each adapting to the challenges of their specific terrain.
That's a plausible scenario, and within these communities, family ties and clan loyalties would have been paramount, especially in the absence of a centralized monarchy for much of their early history.
So those chiefs we talked about earlier would have played a crucial role in maintaining order and resolving disputes.
Absolutely. They were the pillars of Edomite society,
Okay.
ensuring stability and continuity within their respective clans.
We've touched upon their warrior god, Quas, but I'm curious about other aspects of their religious beliefs. Do they have temples, priests, rituals?
While the biblical text doesn't go into detail about their religious practices, we can infer from archaeological findings and comparisons with neighboring cultures that they likely had places of worship,
Okay.
perhaps shrines or high places dedicated to their deities.
So imagine those mountaintop sanctuaries where they would offer sacrifices and seek the favor of their gods.
It paints a vivid picture, doesn't it? And these rituals would have been integral to their lives,
Yeah.
providing a sense of connection to the divine and a framework for understanding their place in the world.
It's remarkable how much we can reconstruct from these fragmented pieces of information.
It is, and what's particularly interesting is how this deep dive into Esau's descendants challenges some of our preconceived notions about biblical history.
In what way?
Well, we often view the biblical narrative through the lens of the Israelites,
Right.
seeing other groups like the Edomites primarily as adversaries or obstacles in their path.
Okay.
But this exploration allows us to step outside that framework and appreciate the Edomites as a complex and fascinating people in their own right.
They had their own history, their own culture, their own triumphs and struggles.
Exactly. And by understanding their story, we gain a richer, more nuanced understanding of the broader historical context.
Right.
It reminds us that the biblical narrative is not a monolithic story, but a tapestry woven from multiple perspectives and experiences.
So as we wrap up our exploration of Esau's family and the Edomites, I want to leave our listener with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
We've seen how Esau's descendants established their own kingdom, developed a distinct culture, and interacted with neighboring groups, sometimes peacefully, sometimes in conflict.
Right.
It makes you wonder, how does understanding the Edomite story reshape our understanding of the broader biblical narrative and the complex interplay of different peoples in the ancient Near East?
That's a great question. It encourages us to continue exploring, to delve deeper into the biblical text and historical sources, and to challenge our own assumptions about the past.
Because history is never just a simple story. It's a tapestry of interconnected threads, each representing different perspectives, experiences, and legacies.
And by unraveling those threads, by examining the lives and stories of those who came before us, we gain a richer, more nuanced understanding of our own place in the grand tapestry of time.
So until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering the fascinating stories that history has to offer.